about 15,000 people have been made homeless in the 7 years since Grenfell. And the people who've been evacuated from this building last night will now add to that number.
Hundreds of firefighters are still on the scene in Dagenham, East London, where a fire engulfed a block of flats in the early hours of this morning. 2 people have been taken to hospital, 4 have been treated at the scene, and 100 people have been evacuated. Let's listen to the city's fire commissioner, Andy Rowe, speaking earlier.
In total, 40 fire engines and around 225 firefighters are at the scene. To allow us to focus on the incident, we have declared a major incident. The building has a number of fire safety issues known to the London Fire Brigade.
Well, the echoes of what happened are fairly obvious, and in fact work had been underway to remove non-compliant cladding. There are reports that no fire alarms went off when the blaze started. Kaya Burgess is at the scene for The Times. Can you bring us up to date, Kaya?
Hi, yes. So the fire is clearly still raging. You can still see smoke billowing from the top of the building, which the odd flame licking out. So it's clearly not completely extinguished. I've just spoken actually to a family who are remarkably standing sort of opposite the blaze at a safe distance, all wearing hospital-issue socks. One of them had to get his aunt and her son out of the apartment. He was wearing only a towel when he left his flat. So he's back on the scene wearing hospital-issue trousers, T-shirts. The young man who's 18 is wearing a blanket borrowed from a neighbour. His mother's wearing a hospital sheet around her shoulders. They don't have anything else with them, phone, money, wallets, anything, clothes at all. They're just sort of watching and waiting, really. There is a leisure centre nearby that's been set up to receive those who have been evacuated. And yes, of course, I mean, the echoes of Grenfell clearly ring very loudly for people. There seems so far no major casualties, which is obviously a blessing. But residents still just waiting for them to get the fire under control, let alone to figure out when they'll be allowed back into what might be left of their homes.
Yeah, and do you know what time the fire started? Because I gather there were reports of residents having to knock on each other's doors to raise the alarm because the fire alarms didn't go off.
Well, I spoke to one man. He said he woke up. He was woken by smoke, which you would assume by the point it's thick enough to wake you, there should have been a fire alarm going off. And he ran down the corridor to where his aunt was sleeping, banged on the door. They came out. People in various states of undress trying to get their way down the stairs with smoke and embers. I asked about the fire alarms, and he said he didn't remember hearing one. His aunt said she sort of became aware of alarms going off as they were leaving the building, but she said she wasn't sure if that's because that's when they started sounding or just the sort of shock and shouting meant she didn't really take them in when she first woke up. So I think there's slightly conflicting reports on the alarms. One local resident said she was woken, she not in the building, but just down the road, by what sounded like a bang at about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. She said the top 2 stories of the building, she said, had only recently been added onto the top. So obviously there'll be questions to be asked over, were they fire compliant at this point? The fire brigade has, as we said that they are, aware of issues with this building. They haven't yet said what those issues are. So a lot of questions still unanswered.
Brilliant. That's Kaya Burgess for The Times at the scene of the fire. Let's talk to Martina Lees now, the senior property writer at The Times, who's covered the ongoing cladding scandal since the Grenfell Tower fire. Martina, obviously this fire has echoes of Grenfell. There was cladding work going on. There were people who had to be evacuated who weren't necessarily alerted in time. Thank goodness there have been no serious injuries or fatalities. What is happening in terms of removing non-compliant cladding around the country?
Well, the Grenfell fires exposed the nationwide scandal, which at its height left about 700,000 people living in dangerous homes and almost 3 million with flats they couldn't sell. So the government publishes statistics on the progress, but those don't give the full picture. And of all the buildings that have been known or estimated to have fire risk, we still don't know how many actually there are. Only about 8% have been fixed, according to the analysis I've done recently. So, and about 15,000 people have been made homeless in the 7 years since Grenfell. And the people who've been evacuated from this building last night will now add to that number. So they will be out of their homes for a year, maybe at least until the building gets fixed. So the progress has been very slow. It took a long time to realize how big the scandal is. And in the beginning, the only people who could be forced to pay to fix the buildings were the people who bought the homes in them. So the law changed 2 years ago to make the companies pay who built the buildings or made the cladding or owned the buildings. But in reality, you have these arguments going on at buildings about who should pay and how much should be done to fix it. So that's why only about 8% of them have actually been fixed to date.
It's really pretty shocking. It's amazing that the residents were kind of living in the building while this work was being done. Presumably that's common practice.
Yes, well, it's very disruptive to force people to actually leave the building. That has happened at some buildings. They were so unsafe that people were given even a few hours notice to leave. So normally they try and keep people in their homes, but it's not very nice. You live with your windows covered in plastic while this is going on. And just looking at the photos and the footage that's come out of the blaze in Dagenham, I also wonder whether the scaffolding system has played a role in possibly helping to spread the fire. So at that building, the top 2 floors were originally clad in, I think, high pressure laminate cladding, which is very flammable. And I don't know how much of that has been taken off and if that had played a role as well. But often it's very common for these buildings to have internal defects as well, where that could spread a fire between flats. So it's usually much more than the cladding. So it is a whole building issue.
Appalling. It is a terrible, terrible scandal, which thankfully Martina Lees, senior property writer at The Times, does so much to keep us informed about.